Mr. Clerk, Mr. Clerk, ready to start? Tell me when you're ready.
Looking for them. Yes, sir.
Good morning. Good morning. I hope everybody's well. First off, if everybody was so kind just to give me a few moments. First off, thank you for being here. To all the employees that are here, thank you for your hard work leading up to the budget season. Your input, your guidance is critical for our success. So I just want to say thank you for always doing an incredible job. I'd like to thank all the residents, business leaders, or anyone who is listening today and is engaging in the Capitol Workshop. We welcome your guidance through email. Today we will not have public input, but if you have a question or any guidance, we welcome it. You can send it to the clerk via email or send it to the commission, and we look forward to hearing from you. Madam Director, good morning.
Good morning. Paula Rodriguez, Assistant Finance Director for Management, Budget, and Compliance. To reiterate the mayor's sentiments, first of all, thank you so much for all of you and your participation in this process, as well as all of our department directors and staff that spend hours and days responding to budget's requests to get their requests in and to work through the various details of each of these projects. And my staff, the budget staff, who also work tirelessly and work on the detail and keep me straight. I always say they're better than me. So I appreciate everybody's assistance in this process. So today is our capital budget workshop. As you know, the week of May 13th, we met with each of you, or around the week of May 13th, we met with each of you one-on-one to review the various projects that were submitted through the through department requests, through input from the community, through input from this dais, and from staff's knowledge of what is needed for maintenance and repairs and new projects in the city. And so today's workshop is your time to be able to talk in the open, in the sunshine about these projects and prioritize the funding to be able to establish this 5-year capital program. And just to give a little bit of what's next, right? So today's June 12th. We have our capital workshop. We will have on July 1st. We will have our property values, our final property values, and our budget office will produce our preliminary budget estimate on July 1st. On July 10th, we will come back to you to set the tentative millage. And present the changes from last year's budget to next year's budget. And so with that, I'm going to present to you that same worksheet that you have in front of you, the worksheet of very small numbers. But before we get into that, I want to explain how we got here. So at the end of, so typically we close out our prior fiscal year sometime in June. And so now, the end of fiscal year 23, after we set aside any reserves, segregated any restricted funds, we have an available one-time fund balance from fiscal year 23 for the general fund of $2.5 million that we set aside for new needs in the operating budget for this budget planning process, and just under $5.2 million of available one-time funds that we set aside or we sent to the capital fund, which has been our typical process. So a total of $7.694 million, just under $7.7 million of one-time available funds that resulted from the year end of fiscal year 23 in the general fund. And so why am I presenting that to you? Because typically, as I mentioned, we set aside an amount to be used for capital. We could always shift that, but that has been our usual process, and so that is part of the culmination of the amount that I'm going to give you today. So in addition to that, we have estimated our revenues for next fiscal year. And so as you know, our June 1 property values came in. Sorry, I should have had that paper here. Our June 1 property values came in at $25.5 billion, which results in an increased property tax revenue of $9.8 million, an estimated increase, right? So we'll have the final values on July 1, but those are the preliminary values that we received.
Could you repeat that number, please?
Yes. So our June 1 property values is $24 billion, 500 million is the preliminary estimate. Based on our current millage, our property tax revenue would be $129,385,000. I'm just going to round it there, dollars, which is an increased revenue of $9.8 million. Okay. So in estimating our revenues for fiscal year '25, we also estimate a one-time interest capital that we anticipate receiving of about $2 million that we can use towards one-time items in the capital budget. And I'm going to kind of sum this up on screen in a minute for you as well. And we have a recurring revenue that we were able to transfer to the capital preliminarily of $11.5 million. And so I'm going to go ahead and share this spreadsheet because I'll kind of reiterate where we got to. Somebody can remind me. Here we go. Okay. So I'm going to go very quickly to, so just for context for those of you who are not familiar with the process or those who are watching online or on TV. So as we have several funds within our city. So the primary source of revenue that we have that funds our capital projects is our general fund. And so first I'm focusing on the amount of money that we have in our general fund. Many of the projects that are proposed are funded from our general capital fund, which comes from our general funds, okay? So I'm just going to flip over here real quickly. So all of the numbers that I provided to you now result in an available $21.6 million for capital on our initial estimate of our operating revenue. So I'm going to show you real quickly just how that breakout is. And let me know if you can see that. So talking about, I can make it a little bit.
Was that fast enough answer?
Zoom in a little bit more.
Yeah. Give me a moment. This,
And just for future reference, the gray
Doesn't work well.
doesn't work well.
More contrast needed.
Yeah.
The older the eyes get, the more contrast we need. They say you also need more light to be able
True.
to see.
so this spreadsheet is always fun to go through at these meetings, so we'll zoom in and zoom out as we need to get the information. Okay, is that easier to view?
No. One more.
On Zoom, it looks great, so if you guys want to join on Zoom.
You know, part of the problem is we have these, we have these stage lights up here, so I've got this brightness
Okay.
shining on the glasses.
We're looking at.
So that's fine. I'm going to read it out to you so that it'll make it easier. Okay, so, and my mouse has moved, but the mouse on the screen has not. So-
No, that does present a bit of a problem. I know you're trying to hide the money.
No, it just doesn't want to go. Okay. So what's being blocked by that mouse signal there is what totals the $21.6 million that we are providing to you as available funding for the general capital funding of our capital projects. So it's made up of the 5.1, almost 5.2 million of one-time funding available from fiscal '23 year end for one-time capital that I just mentioned. We have, we've brought over about $179,000 I know this little mouse thing doesn't want to go away. Let me see if I can get it.
Maybe if you drag the whole sheet, it'll stay where it's supposed to be, or is.
There we
There
go.
you go.
All right.
Now we're talking.
You see, it takes a village.
It does.
All right. So, but now you can't see the 2.1, the 2.
It's okay. We'll do one thing at a time.
Okay, there we go. So 5.194 million that we've brought over from fiscal year '23 available fund balance to capital. Of the available 2.5 million for new needs, we assigned most of that to operating, and we have 179,000, just under 180,000 that we've brought over to capital. We have another 2.1 million that we've estimated of additional interest income to be used in capital as a one-time funding. And then we have another 3.3 million in the general fund that is not in the capital fund of interest income that we have brought in to be used for capital. And then based with the increase of $9.8 million in property taxes, and after we've balanced our budget with operating increases, we have 11.5 million that we've brought from the general fund, that we're proposing to bring from the general fund to capital, to equal that $21.6 million in available funding for capital. Then you're going to see on the bottom that I'm subtracting out 817,000. That is for funding that we would propose to use for country club projects, which doesn't quite fund its own capital yet. The goal is that it would generate enough revenue that eventually it would, but right now we're subsidizing the country club with the general fund, so any projects that we propose or fund would come from those same funds. Okay? Any questions on that? So I'm going to hide this note. So you're going to see that we have several funds that we use towards funding capital projects, and I'll just go through them very quickly. So Fund 310 is our general capital fund. So as we go through this spreadsheet, you have some understanding of what I'm referencing. And within Fund 310, we also bring in funds from AIPP, from Art in Public Places, which is restricted for arts use.
Where do you have Fund 310 on the sheet?
It'll be
It
on
starts
the
off on my
top,
sheet as Fund 320,
the first
350.
few columns, right?
No, the first one is 310.
Second page.
Oh,
Second page.
Page one.
No, it's there,
Right
the
here.
top.
Right above the 21 million.
320.
Oh, okay. I have my notes there.
Yeah, the first
My
few,
mind
the first
already
few
moved to
minutes,
the
we
next
all get
column.
acquainted with the worksheet, yes. So in
More
Fund
arrows.
310, we're going to talk about the general capital funding that we brought in, art and public places, and we also bring grants that we may receive or know that we're going to receive into this funding. Then we have a fund, Neighborhood Renaissance Program, where we have a small fund balance as a program that's now gone away, but we have a small balance of funding in there, so 892,000. Fund 350 is our roadway fund, and so this includes funding that has come in from the estimated recurring revenue that we'll receive. This estimate will likely increase because we will get new estimates from the state during the summer, but this includes about $1.2 million in recurring revenue and about $230,000 of one-time funds that we have available from fiscal year '23. Then we have impact fees, so you're all familiar with the various impact fees. And so we have various impact fees where we have available funds. Many of those impact fees are restricted to certain uses, so we've only identified those projects that can be funded with impact fees to be funded. And so although there is more funding available than what's reflected here, we've only proposed at this point just under $1.2 million. And as we go through the process, if there's any other project that can be funded with fees that we have, we will continue to do that. Fund 400 is our stormwater fund, and so we have $6.5 million. 1.6 of the 1.7 of it is one-time funding. The remainder of it is recurring revenue. We have potential grants in here, so we'll get to those as we get through the projects. Then 410 is our sanitary sewer. similar to stormwater, restricted to those types of projects. And then the Country Club Fund, which we already talked about, this is funding that's being brought over from the general fund. Parking Fund is funded by their recurring revenues and some one-time funding of $4.4 million that is in their fund balance, primarily because we've been reserving for liability in that fund, that now we've been able to release some of that after they closed the books in '23. So about $4.4 million in one-time funding, and thanks to that, you'll see that we're able to fund many of the projects that are needed in parking. And then fleet management, which is essentially an internal service fund and gets charged back to the other departments in each of the funds. And so this is primarily for the replacement program of $3.6 million. Okay. So this spreadsheet, you've all seen it before without the funding portion of it. We also pulled in, at Commissioner Fernandez's request, the amount that we funded for any of these projects in '24, just for reference. You have your prior year available funding and any open purchase orders. This is updated as of last month, so it's possible that something has been paid or spent since then, but this is as of last month's information. The next column that you have is the 25 request. So this is the department's request for new funding for fiscal year 25 towards any of these projects. And then the total is the total of prior year, any open purchase orders, and any new request. And then since the capital budget is a 5-year plan, we also provide to you what planning for funding for future years, right? So 26, 27, 28, and 29 for a total 5-year project cost. For the purpose of this meeting, unless we get into a project that has multi-year cost, I'm going to hide these columns just to make it easier to view. But if we need to highlight any specific project, I'll expand the columns.
Quick question, just for clarity, the open PO column,
Yes.
is that factored into the prior year available, or is in addition to?
In addition to the prior year available.
Thank
Yeah, so the prior year available would be any unspent, unencumbered, unheld money at this time. Okay. So like I said, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to hide the future year funding and the total year funding columns. I'm sorry, let's see if I can do this easily. And let's see. I'm going to also hide the total just for now. Maybe not. Let's see.
You could also make the project name a little smaller. There's a lot of space.
Let's see if,
The column, the first project name.
there are some projects that are longer, but we'll,
Yeah, but I think we can figure it out.
Or you can just click on that column, that box at that point.
okay. I'll be scrolling across the page as we go through. So like I said, this is always an interesting exercise as we go through this program. So as you know, this worksheet is divided up into different categories than how your actual capital budget book, proposed capital budget book is formatted for the purpose of this conversation. And so the first section that we have is the capital matrices. And so these are recurring projects that we have been establishing over the years to fund the renewal and replacement of existing equipment and components of facilities, okay? So network infrastructure matrix is essentially the support of all of our IT systems. So it's all of the servers, all of the maintenance, the replacement of laptops. And so these amounts are based on the cyclical cost of replacement, whether the equipment is scheduled for a 3-year or 5-year replacement schedule, and that's how IT comes up with the estimate. So network infrastructure matrix, the department is asking $2.258 million. We are proposing funding just under 95% of that for 2.145. The reality is that we really do not try to impact the funding to these programs, but in order for us to fund as many of the requests in any given year, we many times have to work with the department to see what is the worst case scenario, how much funding can we give you without interrupting operation. And so in our discussions with IT, they would prefer the full funding, but they can work with the 95% of their request.
Do you know, if I may ask, do you know what the 5% that you shaved off is?
So I just shaved off 5%. Raimundo and his staff will have to figure out how to work within those confines.
So we don't know at this moment what that 5% shave will affect, if it will potentially address issues of redundancy, or if it's issues in regards to software updates, or if it's an issue of ensuring our software and our systems are hardened from ever increasing attacks from malware, from foreign entities.
Good morning, Mayor Commissioner.
Or is it a new project? Or is it finishing an existing project?
Raimundo Rodolfo, Director of Innovation and Technology. That 95% will cover all the critical equipment that reaches the end of life, including cybersecurity and hardware. That 5% reduction, what we would do is some recent upgrades that have been done for critical systems like ERPs. We will have one grace period of 1 year that we will defer the savings for the next upgrade because those systems were recently upgraded. So those are the ones that we will not include in that 95%.
May I ask you a question? How critical is that 5% for you to conduct business?
We prefer always to fund it 100% because that way we save in the account for the life cycle of the system. So we calculate the life cycles based on industry and manufacturing and something that is called mean time between failure. So we, for software, we have more flexibility for enterprise systems like ERPs. So we can extend a little bit the life cycle and say, okay, instead of 10 years, let's put 11 years. That will not be as critical like a switch or a server. Hardware, we don't extend the life cycle because we know that hardware has a high probability of failing when they reach that end of year. With software, especially the software that is hosted in the cloud, that's the one that will be in that 5% that we will extend a little bit without compromising business continuity and criticality. So that's our calculation that we did before with that matrix. So to answer your question, 95% will fund all critical systems, cybersecurity, network, hardware, servers, everything that guarantees business continuity of services.
The one thing that's important, I think, to highlight, I'm sorry if you would,
Go ahead.
is that they can absorb these decreases in any given year. But when their request is decreased year after year, then that is what begins to really impact their ability to provide the service and secure.
Did we
infrastructure.
reduce their request last year?
Yes. So last year, I believe we funded 92%, I think is how much we reduced.
So how about the year before?
I believe I think every year since COVID at a minimum,
So
we
what-
have
what
not
I'm-
fully funded
What
their
I'm going to do
request.
is I'm going to prepare a memo for my office as we go through these items, of items that I believe are critical that should not be reduced. And again, I think as an ever-evolving world in regards to technology, I think shaving 5% after we've shaved them 2 years in a row, I think in my opinion is something that I'm going to do further research, but I think that maybe is not in the best interest of the city. So I'm gonna put certain things that I think are critical in my opinion. Because the last thing you want to do is potentially jeopardize anything that has to do with our network systems, especially when we're talking about going wireless in the downtown, providing Wi-Fi, all the new infrastructure that we have. We're bringing in a new fourth fire station. There's a lot of things that are going on right now that as technology continues to evolve, this would be a third year in a row. And taking your advice, you don't want to make that a habit. And this is so. I know it's a big hit, 5% on 2.5 million, almost $2.6 million, but.
So I tend to agree with that generally for all of our matrices. It is difficult to prioritize the funding that we have, and many times the operating, even though this is in capital, it's the operating of the departments do get impacted to fund other needs or wants in the city. And so as we work through this process in July, hopefully we will have additional revenue and we will be able to maybe increase the funding to some of these projects where maybe we don't necessarily feel the funding is suffice. But this is exactly what this exercise is for, right? So I'm going to highlight this because this will be a project that in the event that we get more funding, potentially we either increase the funding or maybe shift the funding from this conversation today.
Thank you.
Excuse me, one
Yes.
question. Is it possible to get another column where you tell us, where you show the difference of what has been requested and what, the difference between what's requested and what is in this proposal?
I didn't get all the way past my spreadsheet, so thank you for pointing that out. So the last two columns in the worksheet
Okay.
is the amount that we funded and the variance, we refer to it as shortfall, but it's what we did not fund from that particular request.
And to the mayor's question, is it possible for you to include, maybe you can send us to us after, what was requested 2024 and what was appropriated 2024 so that we can see where we cut last year?
Year over year,
and
yeah.
Year over year. And maybe as the mayor was asking, prior years as well, so we kind of have an idea where we've been falling short year over year and seeing where we need to start catching up.
Okay, I can do that. Just keep in mind, and as we go through this worksheet, it's the same idea. Some of these estimates, many of these projects are estimates and proposals, and we don't typically update the request throughout the process unless in discussions with a department, the project changed in scope and then we increase or decrease the request. But typically what I will pull in to that request is the request, I'm going to say request a lot of times, the fiscal 24 ask at the same time last year. So the project may have changed in scope and the need may have changed, but it'll at least give you that perspective that you're looking for.
Right, and I guess realistically, if the request is what it is today, it would have covered whatever the shortcoming was the prior year in order to make up for it, according to the director of the
Right.
department.
In the matrices, the numbers will hold true, but in some of the other projects, they might have shifted because of scope.
So I'm going to interrupt you while we're interrupting. Looking at the column for parking, we have $2.1 million of revenue there. Is that an enterprise fund?
Yes. Parking is an enterprise fund. Their revenue is based on the parking fees and leases, as well as some other small revenues that they get, but generally from parking fees. And so their revenue covers their operating, and then anything else would be used for capital, and we also bring in parking revenue into the general fund to offset the cost of the general fund as well.
So I'm going to throw you a hypothetical.
Yes.
Lawyers like to do that. Let's say, for instance, the cost goes down for whatever is on the sheet, and I haven't gotten into the weeds yet of each sheet. Because we decide to bring in a private company to carry some of the costs, like, for instance, if the Jolt Chargers are something that we want to entertain, and it brings down that number. There's a certain amount of IT that goes into parking.
Yeah.
Could that arguably help supplement what IT has been reduced?
It could. So when we balance the revenue over the expenditure in parking, is, as well as any transfers or debt service or set aside for debt service that we're planning for Mobility Hub. Then we calculate what the amount that can be brought into the general fund is. So anything that gets reduced in the parking fund would potentially come into the general fund and could offset any of these costs. So we could plan to use any reduction into IT's request
All right.
going forward. Or any new revenue. So we calculate the revenue now, we'll calculate the revenue again in the summer. So if their revenue shows even more of an increase for next year, then we'll have a surplus that we can then transfer to the general fund, and I can make a note, if that's the commission's direction, to use that towards any IT projects as available.
Thank you.
Okay, so project number 2, Public Art Restoration Matrix. And so this is a matrix for the restoration of art in the city. And so this is funded from Art in Public Places. Art in Public Places has a healthy fund balance because that funding is restricted to be used for certain purposes. And so this will be funded from the Art in Public Places Fund. Citywide roof replacement matrix. So the ask is for $1.6 million. We are proposing to fund $1.4 million. That will cover the roof replacement at Miracle Theater, and it'll also bring in about $500,000 into the matrix to be used for the future replacement of roofs. Again, we are not fully funding the ask to fund that future replacement portion, but this is our recommendation at the time.
Quick question. My understanding was brought to my attention yesterday that we have a standing line item in the budget every year for Miracle Theater of $50,000. Is that correct?
Yes,
For like minor repairs and those kind of things. So that 50,000 plus that 1.45 million.
50,000 and about 950,000 for the roof is the estimate.
Are you using that 50,000 into that 1.45 million, or is that standalone?
No, that 50,000 is in our general services department's operating budget, and that's for smaller repairs and maintenance that's done in the facility.
Okay, did we use that all last year? Did we spend all the 50,000? Do we know?
I will have to get back to you on that. That is intended, I believe, specifically for plumbing, electrical, and things of that nature.
Can you,
But I will-
can you through the manager?
Absolutely.
Send the commission an email in regards to that, because
Sure.
if we're looking for pennies, last year, yesterday in the commission, we approved almost $42,000. Maybe we can use that line item of 50,000 to pay for that 42,000, or at least a delta.
We can
Or
look into
whatever there
that
is,
number.
look for
and-
some of that money and see if we can potentially use it for that $42,000. If we're looking for money for different line items here, that's a big number, because I know that there's a lot of other, and correct me if I'm wrong, you would know that there's a lot of other roof repair needs throughout the city, correct?
Correct, yes. Yeah.
So if we're gonna dedicate 1.45 million to Miracle Theater, which is an incredible asset, it's a city's, I understand it. That's a lot of money that we're dedicating in that one line item. I'd like to make sure that we can at least, if we can save $50,000, $40,000.
We'll provide you with that information.
Yeah.
Yes.
We can even apply it to, if it's already going to the Miracle Theater, we can apply it to something else. Okay, thank you.
The Miracle Theater funds that were allocated yesterday came from ADA funds that the city has in this year's budget.
Right, so, and we'll get down to that item. We have an ADA project that we've been funding for several years. I think it has about $500,000. We'll see it in a page.
May I ask
And
you
we
a
propose using it
question in
from there.
regards to that, since the commissioner brings that up?
Yes,
We have extensive ADA needs throughout the city, correct?
yes,
So we can use that money for another ADA need.
certainly.
Thank
I
you.
was just going to mention that, because
Yeah.
there's so many areas where we don't
So
even
many
have a
needs that-
curb cut.
If we haven't
for
used the
someone.
50,000 in the Miracle Theater and we have a delta and it's left over, that money goes back into the general fund. Take that portion, try to fund the portion of the $42,000 for the ramp, and try to see if we can plug holes that way. Just an idea,
Yeah, because
Consider it.
we have doctor's offices here without even curb cuts near the parking.
Madam City Attorney, as far as art in public places, are we able to use those funds for this roof repair since it is an art facility? And or are we able to amend the art in public places legislation to expand the use for cultural arts?
No, it is not. It is limited. There's a definition for what it can be used for. We can't just use it for maintenance or repairs to our facilities. We cannot do that.
But we can't expand legislatively what the uses can be.
We'd have to look at that. I think that I would be concerned about doing that because it is very limited, the purpose for which that fund is
Okay.
collected.
I'd like to sit down after and try to see what other places we can use the funds if they're just sitting in an account.
Madam City Attorney, if you would be so kind, send to the commission what is the legislation from the county that is a county piece of legislation. It's not a City of Coral Gables legislation that dictates art in public places and how those funds can be used. It's basically preemption from the county. It has to be used for certain things that are only art related.
Correct. So the county, the county ordinance that applies to municipal government, municipal buildings is limited. It could only be used for the public art.
Now, if we were to say sell an art piece that the city currently owns that has increased in value, what happens to those funds? Do they have to go back to art in public places?
So I don't know that we've had to deal with that before or that we've done that before. I would have to research that, and I can do that.
Okay, because like, for example, the flower fountains out here, the residents have been wanting to get rid of for years. Would we be able to use that fund if we're able to sell them?
So that's a very complicated matter. As you recall, that came up several years ago, and there is an agreement that dictates certain things. So there's no easy answer that I could give you right now on that. But generally, I think the funds that are collected for that purpose have to stay in the program. So that would be my answer right now, that it has to all stay in the program.
All right.
I've met with the city attorney, I don't know how many times regarding this.
Several times,
Yeah,
yes.
this same subject, and I've kept on going around and around trying to find any loophole, and I haven't had luck.
Yeah. So for you, yeah, I know you weren't around when I first started. What I did do is I took maintenance money that was being paid from the general fund, and I did do an amendment to require to be paid from the art and public places, so that the taxpayers are not paying for maintenance of this extraordinary maintenance of the artwork. So that freed up the general fund money a little bit. So, and that took some months to do because I had to go to the committee, and it came back around, and it was distilled, and then we finalized it on extraordinary maintenance, not regular maintenance, because regular pressure cleaning is not something that we could take from the art and public places fund. So that's the short course on many months of haggling.
I have a quick question. How many dollars are left in the ADA fund?
Okay, so as of the other day, we had 506,900 in prior year available for the ADA fund. For that reason, we are actually not proposing funding the ask this year. And so that would be before we reduce the 42,000 or so.
But as of now, it's around half a million?
It's
that's
about
in
half a
there?
million,
Okay.
yes.
Question, the 50,000 that allocated, as Hermes said, for electrical plumbing, if those funds were to be used for something else, what happens this upcoming fiscal year if there is an electrical plumbing problem and the funds aren't there?
So we're about we're just over halfway through the fiscal year, so,
I'm just saying,
yes.
if there's supposed to be $50,000 for electrical plumbing, and come January, there's a pipes burst or whatever happens, and there is no money in that particular fund for that kind of work, what do we do?
So that funding, my recollection, it was created by a resolution passed by commission that assigned $50,000 is to be used as needed for those very specific. And I think it was electrical plumbing. I don't have the top of my head. To date, we just checked it. I think we spent about $1,500, right? On that fund to date. Now, that is really part of our operational budget for facilities. So let's say at the end of the year, we don't spend the whole 50 because some of that money doesn't get, there's no need for it. There's no enough electrical and plumbing issues. Then that's just part of what
Then that fund drops
Goes
to
back to the
fund
general
balance
fund.
and becomes
I think that's
available in
right.
the future year.
If it just so happens that we have something that's very major and it exceeds 50,000, since that is our responsibility, we have to find it within our budget. And if we cannot find it within our budget, then they will have to.
You'd have to come back to us.
Can I give you a recommendation
Sure.
that maybe the commission will consider? if you have an aging building, like all historic buildings, and you already have a line item budget
Right,
that's giving you $50,000 a year,
right.
why not put together a piece of legislation, I don't have a problem sponsoring it, that ensures that $50,000 does not roll back into the general fund. I know it's tough. I know it takes away money that we can use for other things at the end of the year. For example, you said you've only used $1,500.
So far,
But let me,
So-
no. Let me just finish. I know. Let's just say you use 30,000.
Right.
Let's just say you use 20, whatever the number is. But if you want to build, if you want to build something that, for example, you could say, in 10 years, if we only used, 10% of the $500,000 that you would be able to roll, you would have a good amount of money there saved up to potentially replace a portion of the roof or to stucco the exterior of the building, and it wouldn't be such a hard pressing hit, for example, right now, to the roofing line item where you're going to spend 1.45 million. Which, by the way, I think it's a pretty heavy number for the Miracle Theater to spend $1.5 million on that roof.
it's the hip roof.
I know. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's the hip
I know
roof.
it's a hip roof.
It is a hip roof,
Are you
yeah.
replacing just the 3090 paper, or are you replacing even like infrastructure, parapet, the whole 9 yards?
No, it's just the hip roof and
the hip
anything they find underneath, that there's always
That's just
something.
a budget. That's a budget number,
That
right?
is a budget number, yes.
I know, because I know that when we
Correct.
replaced a roof at the Coral Gables Country Club, the number was, I can't remember, but it was pretty
We
significant.
kept finding things and we kept removing it.
As you kept
so
dem-
it's a
demolition,
little
you
bit,
kept
hopefully
finding-
it's a little bit of cushion there in case we
Yeah,
find.
and that's fine. And I understand it's just a
yeah.
budgetary number. But I think that if you have a $50,000 line item that's dedicated already through legislation, I don't think that money should, right now, I don't think that money should go back into the general fund. Keep it there so you can use it for that facility in the near future. Maybe you have to change the windows. Maybe that you have to do something there that on the exterior, and that money can be always allocated to that facility. It's only gonna need more and more attention as it gets older.
So we can certainly, so last year of the 50,000, 47,000 of it was spent. So we can certainly, though, in accounting, as part of our process, we can make sure that any fund balance of that 50,000 gets, I'm not going to say restricted because it won't be, but we can make sure that it gets assigned back to capital for the Miracle Theater going forward. And that way we can begin to, so it would be $3,000 last year, but maybe it's 10,000 this year. And so little by little, we can certainly make sure to funnel that back into the theater.
So I'm going to go back to the ADA remediation line. This city was sued by the Department of Justice, I don't know the year, quite some time ago. The way a city and a municipality can resolve their suits is to have a transition plan. So if you have a transition plan and you're making progress on it, and you're doing things about it, and you're funding it, then you're in compliance. But when you're not funding it, and you're saying you're not going to put money into it, and we have, the needs are high, and you're not putting money into it, it doesn't look like you're executing your transition plan. This is a dangerous area to step into. A number of cities have been sued by private actors and the Department of Justice over lack of compliance with ADA remediation. We have a very long list of remediation to take care of. I've taken a look at it, and that is not even complete. There's a lot of stuff on there that's not complete.
And I know that you've always been an advocate of this particular project, and so
We
the only reason.
we don't need penalties. We don't need to get sued again. We don't need an enforcement action taken against us.
The
So we
only
need to
rea-
step it up.
Right. The only reason that we're comfortable at all, even not recommending funding this year, is because one of the things that we do is that, so this funding is to address ADA issues in facilities, but with many of our facilities going through significant renovations, we take care of those ADA issues during that renovation and as part of the project, which is why we have this significant amount available, because we haven't had to tap into these funds
Right.
for most of those projects. And so like the Venetian pool is a large project, all of those ADA, will be ADA compliant when I'm looking at Public Works, will be ADA compliant when they do the renovation of the Venetian pool. And that's the expectation, that some of these larger projects like City Hall, the Venetian pool, that those ADA issues will be addressed in those projects.
I know, but on a budgeting aspect here, You may want to split this out to be able to show how it's allocated into a new project, okay? Every new project must be, meet the 2010 guidelines. There's, no wiggle room there. This is for remediation money. This is for existing facilities where we're lacking compliance, which includes our parking areas along our streets, where we lack, sufficient signage, where we lack sufficient slope or curb cuts, that we haven't been taking care of. It's because even some of our existing ADA parking on the streets is not correct. You have a mailbox in the way of the accessible path or a pole, so that the whole thing needs to be moved. So it's something that needs to not look like we're not taking action on the existing facilities.
So for the purpose of today, I'm going to highlight that and come back to it because we'll get through.
Now, going back to the roof number, because it's been thrown around that 1.45 is going to Miracle Theater. It is not.
950 is the estimate
950.
for the roof, and then
Right.
500,000 would go into the general matrix for other projects that are forthcoming.
Yeah, I've got the 950 number here.
The request from the department was 700,000, 713,000 for HVAC replacements. We're proposing 550,000. Citywide elevators, their request is 266,000. And so similar to the other matrices, they're requesting 150 for a elevator at the Public Works facility. And the remainder, they're requesting to go into the replacement matrix. At this time, we're recommending that we replace the Public Works, the one needed at the Public Works facility, and not funding the difference. Entrances and fountains replacement matrix. And so this is a fund that they use when it's needed. And so currently, they have about 70,000 in prior year available. We're proposing funding about 50,000 of their $150,000 ask. They don't have a specific project, but this would be money in the case where they need to repair or replace an entrance fountain if it's not covered by insurance because of, people crash into those things all the time. Motor vehicle replacement, this is the replacement schedule for the vehicles that are due to be end of life in the next fiscal year. And so $3.6 million is the request. We are recommending funding the full $3.6 million, and that will come from the fleet funding, which will get passed on to the general fund. That's already contemplated in our estimate, which gives you the remaining balance of $21 million. So we're proposing funding the full replacement plan. Many of you know the history of this city. We had not been diligent with renewing and replacement with our vehicles, and probably 10 years ago, we had vehicles in very bad condition. We've finally gotten to a point where, for the most part, all of our vehicles are in good condition, and so we recommend maintaining that. Improvements to city parking lots and garages. So the ask is $2.1 million, and we are proposing funding that full $2.1 million that will come from the parking fund. Parks replacement matrix. So I might not be allowed to go to parks after this, but we're proposing funding the parks replacement matrix request of $1.9 million at 75%, just under $1.5 million of that. This matrix includes a couple of things. It includes the replacement and renewal of parks equipment, and some of the items at facilities, equipment at facilities. It is also funding some of so the prior year funding is dedicated funding within some of the parks projects. So when we fund a parks project, if there's any equipment that's going to be replaced, that's not new equipment, we would fund it through the matrix. And so they, while they have $5.7 million of available funding now, that funding is essentially dedicated to replacement schedules, and then many times in certain parks that are going to be renovated.
Can you go back to line item 14, motor vehicle replacement?
Yes.
So they're asking for,
3.6.
and we are funding?
The full 3.6.
I just can't, my eyesight is catching it from one item to the next.
Quick question on that. Does that include the trolleys?
That includes the trolleys, the 4 trolleys, right? Or how many trolleys next year? One trolley, okay.
Right, and
4
county,
trolleys over 4 years, right? Okay,
and county law requires us to replace them after
yes.
a certain period of time.
There is,
Have we looked at, I know I brought it here on 2 occasions. One of the reasons why we didn't consider it was because it was Chinese, but have we looked at any opportunities and has the technology advanced for having electrified trolleys to see if we can lower some of our, we've done a lot of research and just wanted to see if there has been anything new in regards to that.
The electric trolleys?
Yeah.
Yes, we're looking at some grants, me and Matt.
Well, we've talked about it. We even brought one here 2 years ago, and we did a test run on it. But at the end of the day, it was just, the company that owns it is a subsidiary of a Chinese company, so obviously I wouldn't move forward with that.
So Mayor, there's 2 vendors that we've been looking at. Hometown is the one that we've been working with for a number of years. A number of our current trolleys are Hometown. We've been working with them. They are still going through testing as far as on their battery on the electric side. We have also been in conversations and gathering information from Gillig, who can make a trolley similar to a bus, and then they can repurpose it kind of as a trolley. So we've gotten quotes from them, and we did submit a grant to the FTA, and we're waiting word on that for 4 electric trolleys. So we should be hearing in the next couple months.
Sorry for interrupting. Let me ask you a question also. Why not do like what other municipalities are doing, where they don't maintain, they don't buy the trolleys, outsource a company, bring a company to, manage all the trolleys, do that? Will we save money, or would it be, would it be something that again would cost us more money in the long run? I'm trying to explore our options. I haven't.
That is the way it was previously,
I know.
before I got here, and I think it was presented by Steve Riley 12 years ago that it was a big cost savings to do it ourselves.
Okay.
So I'm gonna,
That's
why I wanted to hear.
have, but it was a long time ago.
Okay.
Mayor, if I have you all update some of the other things we've been looking at, and there was the green hydrogen trolleys.
Yes.
And Matt, you've been looking at the numbers. I don't know the numbers. You just made a comment to me that one of the prices looked like it was good. Can you fill us in where we're at on that?
We're still researching. I have been getting information from that one vendor that you've been speaking with, but we're still researching really for a fleet of our size. We have a relatively smaller transit fleet. So a fleet from our size, we still are kind of researching the economics, and I'm working with Alberto on that as well.
Right. I mean, it's another opportunity to do a comparison, and the maintenance on something like a hydrogen fuel would be less than diesel, and it'd be less than probably the batteries, because you don't have the decreasing charging value on the batteries that they'd be concerned with.
So to the question whether we should own the fleet or get into a contract with somebody that does have the fleet. The issue when you hire somebody or contract with somebody that owns the fleet, your hands are tied as far as your ability to flex to a different company if the service provider is not good. Because then you will have to go and acquire a fleet in order to get out of that contract. There are other possibilities, which is that you basically have a lease on the trolleys. There are companies out there nationwide that will lease you the vehicle. And that allows you to a more frequent exchange, and you reduce the cost because they benefit from the depreciation. We as a governmental entity could not benefit from depreciation of equipment, and they could do it as a private entity. But I think that the best scenarios that we have right now is for us to own the vehicles, because that gives us flexibility. If the service provided to the public is bad, you could just say, here's your time to cure, 60 days or whatever, and if not, you get into a different contract. As far as the technology, they explained it very well. One of the issues is that really we're looking for that company that specializes in trolleys or small buses that could do the electric vehicle the way that we need it for the public. And also the hydrogen technology. which is what we're looking for. I think that we have a very good fleet in the sense that we have probably one of the few fleets out there of our size that have low-floor buses, which is extremely important for the elderly population and the people. That is a big gain in the trolley business. But we continue to try to enhance our fleet.
Thank you.
Question regarding fleet in general. Because you brought up the point of us having a small fleet, so we don't benefit perhaps from the discounted price that other larger entities do. Do we have the ability to piggyback off of somebody else's purchase orders and maybe add ourselves to them in order to benefit from their pricing?
We're currently, our new trolley purchase, we're going to piggyback on the Georgia contract to get their pricing. That saves us a lot of time and going out for estimates and procurement. And stuff.
Okay. Does that work for all of our fleet, police vehicles?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
We piggyback off of any contract we can to make sure.
Perfect.
So we have like a most favored nations clause in all of our contracts, correct? But we can just apply that
Yes.
across the board.
And we look to see which is the best available for us.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we already jumped to the improvement of city parking lots and garage matrices. This is going to be funded from the Parking Department Fund, and this will address improvements in certain parking lots in their request. Parks Replacement Matrix, I spoke to already. We are proposing funding 75% of that, while Fred is probably giving me a side eye. We've discussed it, and we will, any additional funding that we identify over the summer, we will try to increase the funding to this line and continue to work with parks to make sure they have what they need. Radio system matrix, and so you see my job is very dangerous. I'm only proposing for funding at this time $600,000 of the $969,000 request. This is a matrix that funds the replacement of the radios as they come to end of life. It also supports the radio system. And so while I always say that anything that we don't fund, it's not because it's not a priority. It's just the competing priorities. And so I've spoken with the police chief, who's online, and he understands the funding at this point, and so he has available funding now, and we'll continue to work with them to make sure that they have what they need to replace radios and equipment as necessary.
So it's funded like 70%. Around there.
Okay, you have it noted as being from the general fund. Are HIDA funds available?
62%.
62.
Are HIDA funds funds that can be used for the radios?
So typically, the funds that they receive from FAF and other funds can only be used for new programming. So potentially, like for new officers or for a new task force, that it's the first time, but any ongoing cost, typically those programs don't fund for them.
So HIDA would not be able to, that funding could not go to radio replacement? Okay.
No. Police rifle replacement, so we're fully funding their ask of $13,000 for the police rifle replacement. Fire equipment replacement, so similarly to other matrices, their request is $1.2 million, which is a bit higher than prior year request because they're adding some new equipment to their replacement matrix. And so in working with the fire chief, we've been able to agree that about 90% of this request can be funded for now, and any new funding that we might identify will try and increase that request, but that he'll work with his replacement schedule within that funding. Okay.
Chief, this does not affect, I know that currently getting fire apparatus is very difficult, and it requires a large lead time. The difference here will not affect your ability to seek out new equipment that is necessary to get it on time.
This line item covers all our capital items, not our fire trucks or our rescue trucks. That is under the fleet's budget, and that is under the scheduled replacement plan for the vehicles that Paula just
There's actually a fire rescue that we made sure to fund and put in a letter of intent to get in advance to not lose the opportunity to buy that now. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Chief.
Okay, so we're on the second section. Priority projects funded in fiscal year '23. And so we've talked a bit about, we typically talk about this in each of our budget presentations. This is a 5-year plan that was put in place in fiscal year '23 when we received a significant increase in our property values. The commission and the budget director at the time came up with a plan to identify certain facilities that could be funded in this plan, and using those funds and putting them into capital rather than putting them into operating, since we didn't know how long we were going to receive those benefits of increased tax values. And so the projects that have been identified were City Hall Complex, the Gondola Building, the Venetian Facility, Alhambra Water Tower, Pond Circle Park, Phillips Park, and the development of Firehouse 4. And so we're now in fiscal year '24 and going into fiscal year '25. And I think the good news is that we've been able, through one mechanism or another, to significantly fund or fully fund each of those projects that was identified at the time as priorities.
I see there's funding for Pond Circle Park. I
Yes.
thought we had already,
So the requests that are in here, I didn't want to change anything that we had seen previously, but this request came into from the departments prior to those final discussions with the developer. So you'll see that we're not planning any funding for that. We know that that will be handled by the developer, and those details will be worked out. So going back to the top, last year, we were able to fully fund the gondola building. Or in prior years, we were able to fund the gondola building. We funded the Venetian pool, and with the resolution that was passed yesterday, we've now identified the TDRs to go to the Venetian pool. So you'll see that one thing that did change is we no longer have a request for the Venetian pool, because with the resolution of yesterday, we fully funded the Venetian pool in this fiscal year with the TDRs. The same is true for the Alhambra Water Tower. The Alhambra Water Tower had a request of over $1 million, and with the funding of the TDRs at yesterday's meeting, we have now fully funded the need for the Alhambra Water Tower project.
if I could make a suggestion going forward, why don't we add a column here funded with TDRs so that we reflect all of it on here?
We can, and we'll show that in another place, but yes, we can do that. It's a little difficult because this is now prior year funding, and the other column is new funding, so yes, we could do that. Pond Circle Park, we just spoke about. So although there was a need identified when we put this plan together, we now know that there's discussions with the developer to handle that park, and so that's not something we're funding. And I'm going to skip over Phillips Park and City Hall for a minute and go to Firehouse 4, which was also fully funded in last fiscal year. Many of these projects also received the benefit of the appropriations from last year's efforts at the state level.
Since we're already on it, what's the status of Firehouse 4? How are we doing on the construction, timeline-wise?
We continue to have the weekly progress meetings. Right now, they are working on what we consider the second floor, which is just past the mezzanine. So they're basically elevating the third floor, or doing the structure to pour the third floor and then cap it off. We were doing great as long as we were in a drought. This week, obviously, is going to put us behind for that week.
So we're on schedule.
We're on schedule so far, yeah.
So when is the projected,
The
if we have no storms, et cetera?
The projected completion date is May of 2025.
Okay.
As you know, you should probably add 90 to 120 days to that date. But as of now, according to the contractor and the meetings that we're having, we're on schedule.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Since you mentioned appropriations, based on this year's appropriations, what projects will not be funded?
So, correct me if, so there is the anticipation of a Golden Gate, I'm not as familiar with
Drainage.
sanitary, drainage program. And so we have not gotten confirmation. We have been told that we are receiving that appropriation, but we have not fully received the approval for that. And so you'll see in the stormwater programming, we have 900,000 programmed. That includes 500,000 from the grant and 400,000 for the match. If that does not come through over the summer, then the project will not be funded. That would
Talking
be,
about state appropriations from the state.
I don't, other than than that and the sanitary sewer project. Do you have that information? Yeah,
You're
Oh, there
opening
was-
something up, by the way.
sorry, yeah.
That's okay.
No, there was an earmark request I made through the federal.
Yes. I
That's
have to-
separate, that's separate and apart.
Yeah.
I worked on
I don't
that.
have that information with me. It's in an email. I'll have to pull it out, but I can look and see what the state appropriations are.
Because
I
you
have-
mentioned obviously the firehouse, which is 1.5 million came from.
Those came from
which
last
was-
year's, and those are in
Which was addressed by
prior.
Representative Mooney from the Keys. But
Right.
this year, we're not getting appropriations.
Right.
So at the end of the day, I wanted to get a better understanding of what is missing funding, any pending projects that we're going after, that maybe
Okay.
we would have to match, obviously, with state funding.
I can get an update from
That's
the,
fine. You can give it to me whenever you like. Not a
Thank you.
problem.
okay. So on the priority projects funding, we began this program in fiscal year '23, where we put about $5 million into this program to fund the various facilities, and we had a plan to fund these facilities. We're now kind of at the last leg of this plan, based on my recommendations here. So, I'm sorry, with the exception of City Hall, which we know is a multi-year project and will continue to need funding to completion. So this year's recommendation, last year we put about $6 million into this program. This year's recommendation, because we were able to replace some of that need with TDR funds, is to fund the $1 million needed for City Hall, which would complete the need for the windows, right? So last year, we put $2.5 million into the City Hall project to address the windows. There's an increase estimate for that, and another portion to address just other assessments of the building in order to continue on with that project. So we're recommending the $1 million be put into that project for fiscal year '25. And then last year, the compromise was to move money out of Phillips Park to fund City Hall and some other portions of projects. And so the discussion was to fully fund the need for Phillips Park. And so you notice that the Phillips Park need is $4.7 million. I have $4.4 million coming from general capital, but don't be scared. I put another $300,000 to come from parks impact fees that we have collected and that this park is eligible to receive.
So that's on that blend on the impact fees for 65%, to 65% of the money gets spent for acquisition, 35% gets spent.
Yes. So there is, you can see my little formula here. There's $1,080,000 available in that park impact fee right now. So I'm proposing to use $300,000 of it towards Phillip Park. And I'm going to just scroll down. I'm going to skip this one for a minute. And $600,000 to go towards the William Cooper Park. That also needs funding to finish that phase of the Cooper section of that park. So I'm
But you're
proposing.
you have money in that account, obviously, for acquiring parks, correct?
For what, I'm sorry?
You have money in that account for acquiring parks, correct?
So the purchase of land impact fee, we have $110,000 coming in, available right now for purchase of land. And so, Mayor, I know this is your project, and since we're on it, we'll talk about it. So typically,
But
we have.
it's not that it's my project.
It's something that you've advocated for. Yes.
I did write the legislation, but it's when you're able to use that money to be able to buy private land and make it into a park, I
Yes.
mean, it benefits everybody, so.
And so the prior year available.
The good part about it, if, just to make sure everybody's aware, I don't think many people are watching, but I think that the purpose of that legislation is it doesn't come from general funds, it comes
Right.
from impact fees. So it doesn't come from taxpayer dollars, and those are the type of vehicles you need to be able to do real good without having to address issues of taxes.
Yes, it creates a mechanism in order for us to be able to purchase land and not always have to look to the
But
general fund.
The 500,000 for purchase of land comes from impact fees, is that what you're trying to say?
So in the past, we have proposed funding about $500,000 for the purchase of land.
From the general
In
fund.
some years, with a combination of funds, and so there are, so we receive park impact fees with permits that come in for developments. And so not just big developments, but any developments over a certain size. And so each year for the purchase of land, we have proposed funding that purchase of land at an amount of $500,000. The impact fees that come in, there's a portion that goes specifically for purchase of land, and there's a portion that goes specifically to be used for park enhancements, significant enhancements to parks. And so when the funding is available to fund this project with the impact fees we have, in some years, it's been a split of general fund money and impact fee money, and some years it hasn't. And so last year, we only funded $245,000, and it was all from impact fee money. We didn't fund anything from the general fund. And so this year, I am proposing that we only fund $110,000, which is the available amount of park impact fees. If anything else comes available over the summer, we can add to that number and not fund any portion from the general fund. That would increase the 3.8 million by that $100,000.
So the 500 is a combination of the impact fees and general fund and, okay.
In prior years, it's been a combination, depending on the availability of funding.
Well, for example, last year there was no $500,000 from the general fund
Right.
because it was used for Burger Bob's.
Right, it was,
Right.
the 250 was moved to Burger Bob's, and 245 was funded from the impact fees.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but this year it appears to be total impact fees.
I'm sorry?
This year it appears to be total impact fees. Am I?
So the funding for the purchase of land, I am only proposing at this time, funding $110,000 from the impact fees.
From impact fees. Okay,
Right,
it's
which
not-
is the
it's not
total
from the
amount
general.
available at this time for purchase of land impact
right.
fees. Okay. So we diverted a little bit from the priority projects. So where we began that conversation was in the priority projects. We talked about funding the Needham City Hall and funding the Phillips Park at a total of 4.7 million, 4.4, almost 4.5 coming from general capital, and 320 coming from the impact fees, with the other available impact fees for parks going to William Cooper Park further down the sheet. Okay? And so that concludes the section on the priority projects. And so I'm going to go into our next section, which we call critical projects. These are projects that administration has identified as critical, and I think we all agree that these are essentially life safety projects. And so emergency generator installations, the request is for $651,000, and we are suggesting funding the $651,000. Recertification of city facilities, as we've discussed in the past, the request last year was to fund $2.4 million towards the recertification of facilities. We were able to work out splitting that in half and funding 1.2 last year. You see that available balance now, but by the end of this year, they will have used all of that money. They are finalizing assessments of buildings and identifying the repairs that are needed. And so that 1.3 million available will be diminished by the end of this fiscal year, or at least most of it, and they will need that 1.2 million for the actual repairs needed to address the recertification of our facilities. You're all aware of the changes and requirements of buildings, and so we feel that that's critical. Sidewalk repair and replacement program, and so we've discussed this. at length. I think we all agree that sidewalk repairs is a critical project, and so the ask is 1.5, but again, I ask you not to fear. I'm suggesting $500,000 from the general capital and the other $1 million being funded from roadway. Okay. And so bridge repairs and improvements, the request is for $352,000. We recommend funding the full $352,000. Okay. The next section is a little bit easier. So sanitary sewer and stormwater fees and revenue is restricted to be used in the system. And so all of the projects that are proposed here will be funded from those funds and from those fees. And so I'll go quickly unless you have any specific questions. The funding for these is in the latter column. So it's either going to come out of Fund 400 if it's stormwater, or 410 if it's sanitary sewer. And the good news is that we have sufficient funding to fund, I think we funded the entire program. Yes. Okay. So you'll see the projects that were requested here. So the sanitary sewer infrastructure matrix, similar to many of our other matrices, this is funding that we put aside and use each year for the replacement repairs needed within that sanitary sewer system. Forest main replacement program, similarly, this is to fund the replacement of forest mains. Citywide inflow and infiltration abatement, I am not well versed on some of these, but I think the title speaks for itself. It's the inflow and infiltration of the system. Pump station replacement matrix, and so we also fund that. And I'm just going to scroll down. Some of these are specific projects that have been funded in prior years, the replacement or renewal of certain pump stations throughout the city. Then we get down to sanitary sewer, electronic atlas update and modal calibration, sewer pipe cameras, citywide septic to sewer conversion assessment. So we funded an assessment in prior years, and we're working on that. Stormwater system improvement program, citywide Granada Basin drainage improvements, downtown drainage improvements, Golden Gate drainage improvement we spoke about a bit. We have that appropriation that we're waiting to hear confirmation of.
So, quick question, I'm going to go back up to line 44, page 156. The 422, is that the 422,000, is that the item that we have requested an earmark on?
I look to the sewer expert.
Is that the one that we talked to the representative about?
Forest main replacement program?
Yeah,
Yes, that is the bond.
Is that the one that we requested the earmark on from Salazar's office?
The earmark, it's part of that program. There was this one project down on Campana, Robino, I think it is, which we requested an earmark. So if we get that money, we only have to provide the matching for it.
So how much did we request the earmark on? Do you, more or less, give us a ballpark? I know, you like to be exact.
There's so many of them that.
Percentage of it? Okay. Okay, I just didn't know how much the match was on that, and if this would help relieve some of the pressure on the 422 there.
So I can tell you that without this grant, it will probably be another 2-3 years before I can do that project. Because, this goes in a matrix, so we start putting money away until we have enough money to do it. So absolutely, the grant will definitely provide a significant relief. I just, off the top of my head, I couldn't.
Yeah, no, I know that one's one that we're concerned about because it's so close to the bay.
Sorry?
We can.
Yes.
I know that's the one
We're
we're
going to have to
concerned
get back
about.
to you on that one, but yes, that is right next to the bay, and absolutely, that's one project that will definitely be accelerated if we do get that grant.
All right. Thank you.
So we were down to the storm drainage master plan, cross connection. Okay. So we were down by the Golden Gate drainage improvements. Sorry, my book is. We have the cross connection removal, Cocoa Plum drainage improvements, and then sea level rise mitigation program. So the sea level rise mitigation program is legislation that was written. It's a specific part of the fee that's charged in our stormwater fees, and it's dedicated to be used towards building up a fund for sea level rise mitigation. The recommendation and the intent of this funding is that it would be used towards a significant program to mitigate sea level rise, not just for the stormwater system. And so this particular project has significant prior year available funding, but this is really to, once we identify a program for that, then we would propose to use this funding, but it's not something that we are using now. Maybe something in the conversations that we have had in the flood mitigations and that larger.
This was, that was started 5 years ago, correct? 5 or 6 years ago?
Yes. Do you have it?
About?
Might have been longer, but
The goal there is to hopefully get to $100 million.
By 2024.
Yeah.
Coral Gables waterway maintenance, you'll see the funding request here. So for a total funding of $10.6 million between the two funds, and we were able to fully cover that request. So there's two more sections, and they're broken up by recurring projects and one-time multi-year projects. You're going to see that when we get through this section, right, so we kind of have this prioritized already as, you know, the priorities of the city, and so you're going to see less and less funding being allocated to each of these programs as we go through this list. And we can talk about them as you need, or I can go through them. So it's about 10:30 now. We still have a long list to go, so just let me know if, I'll keep going, and then let me know if you have a question on a specific one. So LPR trailers, so the request is for 100,000. I believe this gets us 2 LPRs. Nobody's looking at me? Okay. Waterproofing of historic facilities. We have been trying to create a matrix for historic facilities and for waterproofing of both historic and non-historic facilities, but the funding has not allowed us to do so. So once again, this year, we're proposing not funding those. ADA remediation, we spoke to a bit at the beginning of the meeting. So each year, we try to fund this particular program. We're not recommending funding at this time, not because it's not a priority, but just because of the availability of funding. Optimize energy and water efficiency at city facilities. And so this has been a program that has paid off. It has resulted in savings in electrical and water usage. We currently, in this fiscal year, we funded a specific project, the replacements of the lights at Salvador. Is that right? Thank you. And so we are not recommending funding for next year. We don't have a specific project identified, but we always try to fund something and identify a project. But because of the constraints, we're not recommending funding this year. Citywide environmental remediation, you're all familiar with the site next to our public works facility that needs to be remediated. And so this is a proposal to remediate that site. We are not currently recommending funding based on the availability of funding. Installation of multi-space pay stations and the Miracle Mile Giralda Streetscape paver maintenance are both projects that are funded from parking, and we are recommending fully funding those projects with parking money.
May I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
Does that also include the removal of existing parking meters? I know that we've been doing them. Kevin would always tell us that we were trying to get as many removed year after year after year.
I believe that it does, and I believe that we are almost complete in the city. There is just a small amount that are still due. Yes. Purchase of land we spoke about. We typically try to fund 500,000. We are proposing the 110 from the impact fees this year. Coral Gables Country Club improvements, and so the request is for 1.3, almost $1.4 million for various improvements throughout the facility. Although the funding is in the country club column, that funding comes from the same general capital funding at the moment. So we are recommending of that almost $1.4 million, funding $657,000. It's two amounts that will address the pool improvements and some structural improvements at the facility.
Do you know how long we're going to stay negative with the country club? Like, what's the projection?
Parks will speak to that.
Good morning. Projection-wise, we just recently presented to the Budget Advisory Board operations. We are not in the negative of our expenditures. So we're expending conservatively based on our needs of the country club, just like any other enterprise would. So we have not been in the negative. However, as discussion with capital, it is not funding future capital improvements as of right now.
Okay, so the money that's going into there is not for operations, it's for improvements.
Correct.
This particular funding is for improvements, and so while the country club, so I'm going to give just round numbers just for ease. So while the country club, let's say we are budgeting $1 million in revenue and $1 million in expenses, they are only spending as they have available revenues. However, as you're going to see in my budget development over the next couple of weeks, I still have to budget the full amount that they need. So you may see in the operating budget that we will also be subsidizing their operation budget, but as the year goes along, they are only spending based on their available funds. They're not spent because it's based on events, right? So as I prepare the budget, it's one perspective, but in actuals and their actual expenditure is another. But this particular amount is only for capital.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
How are we doing as far as events? How are we doing as far as event rental?
This last month in May, we did very, very well to the point where we had, 2 weddings going on at the same time. So that shows you that you can do that. We have the 4 spaces. So we've been very successful. This is now down season. So obviously June, July is always the slow season for events, but we've done very well. We can give a separate update if you want for the country club as a whole. But one thing that, happens with events is often those are paid in advance. So that's not revenue earned until the event takes place and the service is rendered. So we're collecting the funds, but it won't hit the budget as earned revenue until the event takes place. So future events that are being booked for January of next year, we're already collecting on those, but they're not going into the earned revenues until the event takes place.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so moving down the list. So we have Granada Golf Course improvements of about $160,000. Again, that's being funded in that country club fund, and we're recommending the full funding of those. Park AED camera surveillance installation. So in this fiscal year, we funded $200,000 for a pilot program at 2 parks. And so I know that the discussions are underway for those. And so the discussion initially, administratively and maybe even at commission, was that we would try to fund about $500,000 of AEDs each year. We're recommending funding another $200,000 next year and identifying what the next locations are. That's just our recommendation at this point.
And that was Phillips and the Salvador?
Salvador? And Rotary.
Rotary, okay.
I have a question on that. I'm not sure we ever got an answer. Do we have an AED in every police vehicle in the city? We do. Okay.
Yes.
So not the unmarked?
So just for the for purpose of the record, so there is an AED in marked cars, but not in unmarked cars, but detectives will take it from car to car with them.
That's correct.
Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Like the heavens opened up.
Voice of
Thank
God.
you. Citywide alley paving improvements, and so the request is for $200,000. We're currently not recommending funding for citywide alley paving improvements. New sidewalk installations, so the request for new sidewalk installations is $825,000. We're currently recommending $500,000 be funded.
So I'm going to just dovetail a couple questions because I know we're working on some grant requests here.
Yeah.
Is this the amount that's takes into account the grants that we're requesting, or we won't know that until November 1st?
So the $825,000 request includes a list of new sidewalks for the full amount of planning and design. If we had proposed the $825,000 and we received the grant, then we would only need to fund the matching portion because it did include the full cost of planning and design for those locations. The $500,000, however, is reduced from that full ask, and so if we receive a grant, we will have to find the difference. If we don't receive a grant, we will have to prioritize what projects can be done within the $500,000 that we're proposing.
Yeah, I mean, because the grant requests that are being worked on now are just for the planning and design money.
Yes.
So perhaps you can give us a better breakdown later.
So if we move forward with the $500,000 funding, then Public Works can work out what would be their proposal within that $500,000. Okay. Sidewalk extensions and crosswalks, and so this is an area that we've also tried to fund throughout the years, and so we have a bit in prior year available, which will probably be gone by the end of the year. But we're only proposing funding about $118,000 of that $250,000 ask. And you'll see that as money became available, I tried to add at Hermes's behest, I tried to add to this project. Citywide street resurfacing program, we are proposing funding the full $500,000 request. Citywide traffic calming program, so the request is for $1.4 million, and we are proposing funding that from various sources at 90% of the request. So $881,000 for general capital, the $892 available from the NRP fund, and the remaining of the 90% of $436,000 from the roadway fund, for a total of $1.3 million of that almost $5 million ask.
Now, I have a question on that, because this is in addition to the speed tables that we talked about yesterday, which would add up to about $1 million, correct?
Correct. So we have several traffic circles which are significantly more expensive and take longer to be designed. And as I mentioned before, a few of the ones that we put forth on the early phases, usually due to tree relation, people have said we don't want them. Moving forward, we don't know not every location is going to have a tree problem, so we don't know moving forward how that's going to get worked out, or what alternatives will come up out of that. So that's the big question mark there. But yes, that is in addition to that, and the big money is the circles.
Thank you.
And you'll notice that this project typically has a prior year available fund balance because they're working through that community process and getting those locations approved. Biltmore Way streetscape improvement. The request is for $150,000. So this year they have funding for some landscaping improvements. The request and during the budget process, we included funding for community outreach, for initial community outreach on this project. The $150,000 is for planning money to start planning for that next phase of this project.
Yeah. And the number was originally higher. Sat down with staff and was able to determine that because what they want is just trees put in on the existing sidewalk, we were able to reduce that number.
Yes. Yes, and so that was taken into account in the current year funding and what the project for the landscaping has come out to be.
Right.
Citywide landscaping and irrigation improvements, I know Dina is giving me the side eye online, and so the request is for 800,000, and we are proposing 500,000 of that ask. Residential waste pit restoration, so previously we were funding this through, we've gone back and forth. We used to fund it in operating, we funded it in capital. We're going to fund this in operating again. And so we're going to try a different route to addressing filling the waste pit. So even though it's not being funded here, it's going to be in their operating budget to deal with it there. Okay? But it's not going away.
Good.
Tree succession plan. So again, the ask is for 250,000. We're proposing 100,000 funding for that. There is available funds in the tree trust fund that they have as well, so they tap into that. I know that they've used a lot of that in the recent year, but at this point, we're proposing 150,000. Mangrove trimming along the waterway, the department asked for $200,000 to begin addressing that. We're proposing 100,000, and I've spoken to Hermes. He'll work on what he can address with those funds. Okay.
I
So then-
have a question on
yes.
something I don't see here.
Okay.
Our street markers, where does that funding come from? And I know a few years back, we did an entire cleaning and repainting of our street markers. And ideally, as we head to our centennial next year, be nice to have those street markers fixed and repainted, so that, our city looks good going into our centennial.
So that was about 7 years ago. And over the last few years, we've tried to put a request to create almost like a matrix where we get those street markers on a schedule, like where every 5 years they'll get redone. I believe there's some funding
So there's
currently.
so there's a request in the operating budget. There's 2 or 3 requests actually in the operating budget. One of them is for the molds, and the
Correct.
other one is for some maintenance. And so we have, in this number, we have already contemplated funding the Public Works request for funding to address the maintenance of the street markers.
Not just to the funding that we requested was not to do all of them. It was to do about a quarter or a fifth of them and just do on a regular basis. We also do some of them in-house, but obviously it is folks that are doing several things. So it's just, if the idea is to do them all in one chunk, it will definitely have to be through a contractor.
What's the cost?
I'm sorry, 7 years ago.
No, what's the cost
I think it's
of-
80, it's just under 80,000, 72,000 for the,
So to do them, we estimated about $150 pair to do them. I think we may have gotten some kind of a solicited proposal recently by the people who did it last time. It was slightly less than that. We have almost 2,500 of them in the city. So if we do all of them in one shot.
I guess, can we just put this on the next agenda to discuss, and then we can talk about it next commission meeting and see how we can.
yeah, so I think the ask for the portion that he said, for the phase that he said was about 70,000.
Right.
Like, I want to say it's 72, my staff is double checking.
And that's
So we
about for a
propose-
fifth, is what
Right.
you're
That
saying.
was based on our estimate.
So we're looking at about $250,000 to $300,000.
To do all of them in one shot, yes. But like I said, we recently got an unsolicited estimate from a company out of the blue. It was a company who had done it before, and the price was a little bit less than our estimate. So we can come back to you and say, okay, if you want to do them all, this is what it will take.
Mr. Clerk, can we place that on the next agenda?
Sure.
Thank you.
While we're doing that, can we also get an update on the City Hall windows?
Yeah.
For the next agenda, see where we're at. I know that it takes 3 months to build them, and then, Historic has to do their review of them. But I just want to get an update where we're at, because it's been a couple months since we spoke about it. Had a separate meeting, so.
Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, so we're in the last section, but the last section is like 2 pages. Citywide litter receptacles, we don't have any new funding requests, so I'm just going to go to the ones that have new funding requests, unless there's a specific one that you want me to highlight. Wi-Fi capital improvement project, so this is a project that's done through a reimbursable grant, so we have that fully funded through the grant. Then you have several requests from the Public Works facility, which we have not funded in years past, and we are not proposing funding at this moment. So the reprogramming of their interior offices at Public Works, citywide facility impact glass installation, we have not funded, but again, similar to ADA, any renovation of buildings, we would address any impact glass at those facilities at that time. Metal canopy structure at the Public Works fuel station, we're not proposing funding for. Public Works facility exterior painting, we are proposing funding that. It is important to maintain the envelope of that building, and so we're proposing fully funding that request. New parking lot request and a new warehouse request at the Public Works facility, we are not proposing funding for at this point. Skipping down to the warehouse 1, this is where some of equipment is stored, and it does need some work to the floor, I believe, but we're not currently proposing funding that request. Merrick House repairs and improvements. So this number may change slightly based on the change that we did yesterday. So we assigned $150,000 in TDRs to the Merrick House. This $30,000 was intended for an assessment. So Anna's staff is going to just verify the need for the funding for the assessment, and this number may go down. We'll just reshift that to projects that we've talked about, like the matrices earlier in this meeting.
So I see there's already 173,000 in there, so.
We have now.
With yesterday, we're.
You got this list this morning
325.
because we made the changes that came through commission yesterday, yes.
So that does reflect the changes
That
made yesterday. Perfect.
reflects the change, right.
Perfect, thank
This
you.
whole document reflects the changes of the TDRs that were done yesterday.
Okay.
Say again?
Yeah, I'm just squinting to see which line you're on.
That's
We are
line
on
102.
Merrick House, line
35.
35.
Yeah, because we don't have the,
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to scroll down to the Centennial Public Art Program, and so to the conversation of AIPP, we do work to make sure that we try and fund as much from AIPP or any restricted funds that we can. The Centennial Public Art Programming will be funded from the Art in Public Places funding.
That's why it's not in orange.
I'm sorry?
That's
why it's not orange. Anything orange was marked to kind of highlight projects that generally come from general funds. Biltmore Hotel renovation, and so this is part of our revenue sharing with the Biltmore Hotel. This is the last amount that is due to the Biltmore Hotel. With this $215,000, we'll have completed the requirement of that agreement, and it's a much lower amount than in prior years. You can see that last year was $800,000, and so then the full revenue will benefit from the full revenue that we receive from that property. Girl Scout House restoration, we're not proposing funding at this time. Miracle Theater restoration, and so the ask, okay, this is a different project. The ask is $600,000. We're not funding this request we're not proposing funding for this request at this time. The museum repairs, and so again, this reflects the $500,000 that came in from TDRs, whether they get the grant and we match it or we use it for the needs of the facility. And there's a remaining ask of about $25,000 that we're not proposing at this time. Maintenance of historic facilities, so this project came out of the resolution adopted not at this last commission meeting, but the prior one, so the funding of $50,000. Closed circuit television security, we are not currently, this comes from parking, and we are currently recommending the full funding from the parking fund, and you'll see that down this way. The same is true for the rooftop solar photovoltaic canopy at Menorca Garage. Thank you for that. And so that's $50,000, and that'll come from the parking fund. Okay. And so now we get into parks. And so parks submits to us all of the various requests that they get from the community, from discussions with commissioners, from all of the avenues that people approach them about enhancements in parks. And we know that for every neighborhood, their park is a priority. And so when we don't propose funding for these parks, it's not because we don't believe it's a priority, it's just because we are prioritizing the funding available to us. And so Betsy Adams Park enhancements, we're currently not proposing funding. Catalonia Park enhancements, Durango Park enhancements, Hammock Oaks Park, neither. And then we get to the William Cooper and Nellie Moore Park, and so we funded a portion of that work this fiscal year, and they are asking for an additional $600,000 to address additional needs that came out of the meetings with the community, and so that we are proposing to fund from those same park impact fees that we have talked about. So that would fully fund the need at the Cooper section of the park. I'm sure they'll be coming to you next year with the Nellie Moore section of the park needs. Okay. And so moving down the line to the youth center pickleball and the citywide pickleball. And so I just want to preface by saying that, again, these estimates are done a couple of months ago. And so the estimates come out of the discussions at commission or discussions in other areas. And so the youth center pickleball court installation came out of the initial discussions at commission of an option at the youth center, which doesn't seem to be moving forward in that fashion at this moment. So at that time, there was an estimate of $1.7 million for the two areas. We're not recommending funding that portion. And then the citywide pickleball court installation is the estimates that Parks had previously provided, which encompasses various facilities like Kurdak Park, I think Biltmore Tennis Center. And so that would be to do all of those projects in the fashion that they estimated it. We are proposing that we fund maybe $500,000 towards and allow the commission to come up with the appropriate plan for a phasing in of pickleball programming. This is just our initial recommendation, but some of the discussions have been along that line, so.
So 500 for this budget. So what are we looking for in the future? How long is this pickleball facility going to really take?
Well, I think this was more about installation of pickleball courts wherever, and correct me if I'm wrong, wherever we would be able to fit them in our current park system. It wasn't for the actual creation of a facility. The facility conversation we've had, and I think we're still looking for a location to do it, and so we wouldn't even know what the cost would be. I think the rough estimate we got was close to $1 million to do something on top of a parking garage. But until I think we have a concrete plan, we may have more to talk about as we get closer to budget. I don't think we're there yet to budget for a project. One of the things I've talked to the manager and staff throughout this process is I think we should prioritize our funding for capital on projects that are shovel ready, just to make sure we're not just putting money into an account when we have projects that can get done and accomplished in the next year. So I think if we start budgeting, $1.5 million towards a facility that may take a couple of years to get there, I think we're cutting residents short on other projects that we could be allocating funding to.
Yeah.
No, I would agree with you. There's another potential opportunity, and I asked Caroline Investor to look at the numbers. We can review the numbers, how much basketball is being played every day of the week. We may be able to split these courts out and, provide a pressure relief there. Glancing at the sign-in sheets, it appears to be 1/3, 2/3 versus residents versus not. There's another source of revenue there that we can tap into with, just even if it's a small fee to pay, it helps pay for the staff. It helps defray some of these costs. There's a lot of needs. I know at the youth center with the HVAC systems, et cetera, that we just can't make everything free necessarily. We'll have to charge something.
I just want to, in reference to the youth center and the basketball courts and the pickleball courts, I'm comfortable, through the manager's office and the community recreation team finding when basketball, when pickleball, make those adjustments. But every time I go by there, besides the pickleball days and pickleball nights, the basketball courts are used, and I see dads, with their 9-year-old kid playing, and just I remember growing up and being at those courts myself, and that's part of that community experience that I never want to see go away. So I think we can work on the hours and the days, but to eliminate the basketball courts, I now have been focusing more, and I realize that it's a way for people to sort of be themselves and disconnect from the world. So I just want to make sure that my position is basketball courts should stay, but when and how, and that's something obviously to discuss.
No, I agree basketball courts are going to stay. I'm just saying that I don't see the complete 4 baskets being used all the time. Okay, so there's periods of time where people are actually coming in with their own purchased portable pickleball nets and setting them up on part of the basketball court, and no one has any conflict there. They're happy with that. So it may present an opportunity once we look at the numbers, but the numbers got to be crunched on the actual usage for a while. Because we do have 2 basketball courts that are indoor. There are games going on. They are competition games because we have a scoreboard going. So I've been, I do have a couple dogs I walk through there on a daily basis, so I get a pretty frequent observation, except for when it's raining. No one's out there.
So when we decide, when we find the place where this project can happen, pickleball, is it going to be easy if it's already budgeted for to find the money to do this?
So depending on what's decided by the commission, right now we're assigning the general fund, the general capital money that we have available to us. So that is this exercise. So like the commissioner said, it's difficult for me to propose putting aside more than $500,000 for pickleball at this time because of where we're at with location and facility. But it will be difficult then we will have to figure out where we will have to shift funding, because it's not necessarily that there will be more funding. There will be more revenue over the summer, there typically is, but whether it will fund a $1.5 million facility, probably not. We may find more cost over the summer too. So this, in our discussions and our exercise with the manager and the assistant city manager in the department, this felt like a reasonable amount, but no, it won't address the funding needed for a future larger project.
I think you're doing the right thing. Number one, we've had this discussion multiple times. $500,000 will more than cover, there should be leftover money to address all design elements once a location is picked. I've received two other opportunities from residents in the neighborhood over the last week of other areas that could be potentially looked at. I'll be sending a memo to my colleagues on the commission for consideration, but $500,000 as a line item. Well, we want to address the issue and the outcry for pickleball. I get it, but this is an opportunity to at least put money into design once a place has been chosen, once it's been vetted by the community and everybody's addressed the issues, we move on. There's a lot of things that I see here on our workshop spreadsheet which need to be addressed. Radios, ADAs, network, infrastructure matrix, traffic calming. Pickleball's important. I'm not saying it's not, but putting $500,000 is a major first step moving forward to make sure that we address design. Can't go anywhere without addressing issues of design. That's the first thing you need to do. So these projects are done over multi-year phasing. No project is done within 1 year, especially when you're talking about a multi-million-dollar project, depending on the location and the size of the project. So I think $500,000 is a very, very, very strong move forward and makes a statement in regards to this city's commitment to addressing pickleball.
I think it's like the conversation we had yesterday on sidewalks. You got to have design money. You have to have essentially the equivalent of architectural drawings to have anything shovel-ready. Once we have it shovel-ready, then, we can go out and seek grant money for something.
So let me give you an example. Blue Road sidewalks. You have 2 bridges on Blue Road that do not have sidewalks, that people are walking up a bridge on wheelchairs to cross the bridge if they want to walk in that neighborhood. We've been working on that. I've been working on that with Hermes and his team and Melissa for, 2 years now. We've been working on that. Funding it, planning, county, looking for ways to put it into the budget. And it's taken a multi-year process. So I think this is a very, very strong and positive step forward.
I agree with that. I think, right now we have no funding for pickleball in this year's budget.
Right.
So $500,000 will go a long way into next year's budget. I don't think that a facility can be built in 3 months anyway. It's not
No.
something that's going to be done quickly. So this would definitely cover design and possibly the beginning of construction, and we can possibly finish the funding for whatever we finally decide to do in the following year's budget. But I think even the folks in the pickleball community understand they want to make sure it's done right, and it's done, not just throwing some lines and, throwing some concrete and having a place to play, but making sure that we have a place that they can play long-term and that it makes sense and it fits the needs of the community. So I'm and it's one of my priorities, and I think this definitely puts us in the right place, but it doesn't become a shortcoming for other projects that are also important.
I think it's important that they understand that it's a multi-year project, right? Because the urgency when they've came in here, I don't know how many times, it's almost like they need something now, right? So their comprehension of it's going to take years to accomplish this, I think, is important.
And I think we're doing a few things to alleviate that, opening up Sundays for pickleball at the youth center. Phillips Park is going to be a huge impact once that comes online as well, with the addition of pickleball there. We are taking steps. Underline is already under construction. Those pickleball courts will become available probably around the same time our facility would. But there are things that are being done to start moving the needle forward. I wish we could say from one day to the next, let's do 20 pickleball courts and create a facility, but we're not. We don't have that kind of space.
You don't have a Mary Poppins bag? You can just...
I wish.
Well, clearly the fact that we haven't quite identified the location has us in a pickle. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You want some applause on that one?
I have been preparing. We have legislation that the commission approved unanimously a year or two ago having to do with sponsorships, Fred and Carolina. And could that legislation where we have private entities be sponsors for events, is that something that either the language allows us to have private partners sponsor whatever we do with pickleball, or, if we need to tweak that legislation, I'd be more than happy to bring it back, because I'm looking at possibilities that exist that perhaps we can get private dollars to sort of make ends meet.
Well, and while you're talking about the private dollars, there was also an offer from someone on the soccer field for Phillips Park. I mean, I think that's a comprehensive discussion we need to have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
And we've started, so in terms of the private money, it depends on what we're talking about. Are we talking about private money for funding facility projects and infrastructure? Of course, we can. I think, like anything, that we'd have to have a deal that works for, obviously, not only for the city, it has to work for the sponsor, and then that would come to commission for approval, because
do we have the legislative framework in place to be able to do that? Because I remember some years ago, not now, but going way back, and you were still around, they were talking about
Right.
Getting private sponsors for the youth center gym and stuff like that. But there was, at that time, within City Hall, in the community, there was a lot of pushback. Times have changed a lot.
Well, you're still going to have some of that because the pushback, like for instance, when I was there, when we were talking with the youth center discussions were with like the soft drink vendors
Right.
that wanted. Then you were going to have Pepsi Cola Youth Center and the big signs, and there wasn't an appetite for the commission when we presented it. Pepsi gave us a pretty good amount at the time, which now
Yeah, it's
20 years later, it's not that much, but we didn't want to have Pepsi Cola signs on our scoreboards. We didn't want to have the Pepsi Youth Center on the front. So, like I said, if it works for the city and that's always been the problem because we really haven't had an appetite to kind of, stadium name brand and pop names on our facilities.
I know the youth center, there's some legal limitations as to what can be named or what can't be named because of the deed. But just in general, broader idea in terms of finding or creating a state-of-the-art or top-of-the-line pickleball courts, facility, whatever you call it, it might be an opportunity for corporate partners that want to invest in the community. And if we have the framework, and I think we have agreements that we've used in the past to do something like that.
And there's also possibilities for, turnkey type situations where someone comes in and builds it and operates it. If the city is okay with them operating it with a certain revenue split, and so I know that there's opportunities out there as well. There's been some discussions where people have said maybe you look at that. So that's something we can look at in the future.
And beyond the revenue split, I'm talking branding. Whatever you want to call it. Whatever company. Is that something your department or economic development, or obviously the elected officials would be doing their part? How would we go about letting the private sector know that there's perhaps an opportunity to be part of this, a partnership with regards to pickleball?
The answer to that is, I think it's all of the above. I think we'd reach out and we'd work with economic development. They have a little bit more of the corporate and business contacts than we would, but yeah, that's what we would have to do. We'd have to work with them. Absolutely.
To me, if my colleagues feel that that's something worth exploring, perhaps we can ask the manager, through the manager, to have his staff look into it and see what we can find out and what kind of interest there is. It's another option on the table, and maybe it, at the end of the day, works out. Maybe it doesn't, but I think it's worth looking into.
Absolutely.
And I think we had a perfect example with the pickleball clinic that we did during the farmers market.
Yep.
It was sponsored by Publix and by Poppy.
Yep.
And they brought their own court, set it up in our parking lot, and we were able to offer it at no cost to our city and to our residents. So, I think anything that we can do to consider a revenue stream that the city can use to provide services is great. I've even heard our commission meetings have higher ratings. Maybe we can have them sponsored.
So I just want to, again, I appreciate the idea, but I oppose the idea. I think that we need to protect our brand. What has set us apart from other cities is, number one, we don't have bus benches with advertisement. We don't have, again, it's a great revenue source. You can make a ton of money. Obviously, we don't have billboards throughout the city. We could do that also and get a bunch of money. We don't allow exterior signage or advertising, for example, on our trolleys. We've talked about potentially allowing it inside the trolley when you're inside. We've talked about that years ago. I just think that we have to be very careful in regards to how we would brand something. I think it's great if you want to have a pop-up scenario like Publix when they want to invest in doing something one day, 1 week, and they want to provide over a weekend. They want to be sponsor of an event, and they want to have their billboard up, and they want to have a sign. They want to have something that says very clearly that Publix is engaged with the city and that they're, for example, a partner with the city. I have no issues with that. Zero issues. I have no issues with a small little plaque on a bus bench if they want to make the investment of that, or for example, in a park, we want to dedicate the park to a certain entity in our city. But when you start putting up big signs and it says Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Publix, corporations, I just think it takes away from our brand. It cheapens our brand, and it's something that, again, if you look at our trajectory over the last decades, the last 100 years, it has set us apart because we have maintained our brand. We haven't gone looking for those revenue streams, which again are very tantalizing. But look what's happened when we've chased revenue streams. For example, with Miami-Dade County, we've taken grants and monies from Miami-Dade County, which has handcuffed us in regards to what we can do in parks, in terms that we can't allow for pickleball, for example, in certain parks to be only for residents. We have to allow the entire county.
Correct.
I've even asked you a few years ago, can we return the money? And you said, we can't. We took the money, we can't return it. Because at that time, it looked like a lot of money when you thought about $1 million.
It did.
And now you look at yourself and you see, as you go down this worksheet, you see what $1 million gets you.
Not much.
It doesn't even get you a small park in the Golden Gate area. We're still short.
Yeah.
And that's a playground, that's some landscaping, that's some hardscape, and it's nothing real crazy in regards to infrastructure significant. So my opinion is, I think it's a great idea, but I'm going to pass on that because I don't want to open up that door because it's a slippery slope in my opinion.
For clarification, when I said branding, I didn't, at no point did I mention big signage. I said something that the community recognizes we have private partners, people, companies that are interested in enhancing the experience for our community. I'm sure at the fireworks, I think we've had perhaps, or events like that, we've had partnerships. Even if it's a Chamber of Commerce, it's partnerships. Chamber of Commerce is known as to be a great partner of the city of Coral Gables. The Coral Gables Community Foundation, a great partner for the cinema. I have the Anthony Abraham Foundation that came in. They want to be a partner because they want to give back. So when I said branding, I didn't mean a billboard, but I meant communication to the community that they're engaged and they're here to enhance our experience. That's what I meant. I didn't mean a billboard or a big sign.
So that was pickleball. So going down the line, we're almost done. So nobody thought it could be done in a couple of hours, but here we are. Salvador
Should we
Park
take a break then? No.
I guess I spoke too soon, right? Okay. Salvador Park improvements. So this request is for improvements at the tennis pro shop and the tennis facility. We are not recommending funding this at this time. We think that this is probably a future year project.
Can we go step, just, I missed it because I had to step outside to take a call, the Rotary Park enhancements? Where are we on that? Just want to make sure.
There was no
On
request.
funding,
There's no
from what I remember, we had talked a little bit about some landscaping and a few different things that we could potentially.
Yes.
We had talked about a safety.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. There's some money here, but there's also money within the matrix that already has money for Rotary Park. So we're going to look at doing.
Because we've done 2 site visits there, in
Yeah.
regards to landscaping, and they also wanted one of those.
We're going to do the light poles.
Light poles, and they
And
also
then-
wanted one of those safety buttons. What was it called?
Right. The light pole, it's got all that, but also it's time to replace that playground. So we're trying to do all of it at once. And, there's been some regulation changes on the fencing, so we have to change the fencing. The height is now bigger, according to playground guidelines, so we got to do all that. So that's in there. It's in our matrix plus this money. So I think we're up to like $700,000 to work on Rotary and get that done. And we're already starting.
And if you remember, when we met with the residents there, they just wanted just a real simple, something passive. They wanted cameras. Obviously, they were having some issues there with some transient situation there, and just making it as simple as possible, passive park with maybe a little playground area for the kids.
Yeah, we're not looking, we're going to make it maybe a little nicer, but it's not going to be an expansive playground. It's going to be the same kind of thing, a 1-unit, small area with a couple of small ground things, the same that they have there now.
Okay.
We're not looking to expand it much more.
Thank you very much.
So while you're up there, Fred, the youth center improvements, were those more maintenance or are those,
So that is the larger project for the youth center. So this year, we put funding in for simple design and conceptual design and maybe some community outreach. And so the idea would be to fund the larger project, the larger renovation. And so the 1 million for this year was really a carryover from prior discussions, but I think we all know that we're not at a point yet to move forward with funding the youth center renovation. And so I had said the Salvador Park improvements is improvements at the tennis pro shop facility and the tennis facility, and so we're also not recommending funding that in this fiscal year. It's probably something that's a little bit further out.
But I will say that you talked about it, we are going to do the lighting. That was part of that you discussed. So at least we're going to handle the lighting in the tennis center. which is very important, and we're doing that through that funding. This request is more for the building. We did it at Biltmore, which, was a resounding success, and so eventually we'll have to get to the building at Salvador.
So a question for Commissioner Menendez about Coral Gables Senior High Park.
Yes.
I haven't heard that the discussions with the school board have borne any fruit.
I spoke to the residents that reached out to the school board, and the response back that the school board is not opposed to us moving forward with this aspect, this part of conceptual design. So we're got a green light to move forward.
Can we get that in writing? Because there's a track record there that doesn't always work with school boards. We need something in writing.
Sure, no issue.
Okay.
Yep.
From the school board.
I understand.
Okay. Just want them to acknowledge, because people have, different people come in, the memories.
And the good thing is,
different.
this isn't something new. It's been around for a while. And,
No, I know, I know, but, I've
Yeah.
promoted the other folks that they're 501c3, and I sent them off to deal with the school board. They need to get something in
Absolutely.
writing.
No issue whatsoever. I'll reach back to the residents and we'll take care of that.
All right.
And so, as the commissioner mentioned, that's a proposed $50,000 for conceptual design of a park at that Coral Gables Senior High location. The mayor spoke a little bit to this project, the Blue Road open space improvements, and so the request is for $150,000 to finish that project, and so we are proposing funding that from impact fees. Police body-worn cameras, and so this is part of the programming of that.
May I ask you a quick question
Yes,
just
of
on the
course.
Blue Road? And I think this may be more towards Hermes. Mr. Diaz, that area, we've talked about the connectivity of the sidewalks.
Two separate things altogether.
I know, but I just want to make sure that we're spending money to attract people to use this park. I want to make sure that they can get there, because it's very close to the bridge, and there's nowhere to park there. It's a neighborhood park, so people are going to be walking there.
The plans are done. We're actually working with a contractor to get execute a PO, and we're also working with the county. There's some trees that are invasive that need to be removed, and we're going to be doing. We need to do that ahead of the actual. But that project's going to start this year, probably within the next. I would say within the next couple of months, more or less.
I just say that because as you make that park attractive and people start realizing that it's not an empty green space that belongs to the neighbor or belongs to somebody who hasn't built their home there yet, people in the neighborhood are going to start using that property. They're going to want to use the park, and there's really no way to get to that property unless you walk there, and there's no sidewalks there.
That sidewalk will be done before the park opens.
And the issue there, that's great. And the issue there is that the location of the Blue Road open space, it's on a circle.
Correct.
So on the circle makes it even more. You can't park there.
No, you can't.
Can't park there. So there's like that. I think that's a positive that the residents are happy about in the neighborhood. That it's only for residents of the neighborhood. So once that gets done, I would love to see the sidewalk coming all the way from University, going over, going on Blue Road, going around the circle on Blue Road, and then maybe if it comes to an end of the park, or the neighbor, maybe we can convince the neighbor who we just
We made that deal with.
We made that deal with on yesterday's commission meeting. Maybe we can say, listen, can we put the sidewalk all the way up to the front of your house? I think that would be something. Because at least you'd get away from the circle.
Right.
Get away. You would have people would have at least a home, to be able to walk in front of to get to the park.
Sure. No, it makes sense. And like I said, the sidewalk will be done before the park is done.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for the update.
So moving down to police body-worn cameras, so this program started with funding from grants and from the asset forfeiture funds, and so now we need to complete that project this year, funding $732,000. Closed-circuit television security system, request for $250,000. We're proposing funding that full amount. Police mobile command unit canopy, so the police department is requesting a canopy at Public Works to cover the unit that's getting hit by the sun. We're currently not proposing funding that in this fiscal year. Granada and Columbus Plaza transportation improvements, a request of $186,000. We're not proposing funding for this fiscal year. Installation of bike infrastructure, we are currently not proposing funding the ask of $200,000. Old Cutler Road entry feature, we are currently not proposing funding. Milling, resurfacing, and restriping, we are currently not proposing funding the ask of $200,000.
Can I ask you, I apologize, on 118 Granada and Columbus, can we for next year have a line item or at least a discussion about the landscaping on 37th Avenue, the entrance feature in 37th Avenue in front of, right on that median where the fountain is? You know what I'm talking about, right? I don't, who's responsible for that median?
The median on 37th Avenue.
In front of the hotel where the fountain is, in front of the Hyatt.
The Hyatt, okay, there you go.
The Hyatt's in front of it?
Correct.
Are they in charge of the median?
That's our understanding, yes.
And can we get clarity on that?
We do.
Because I'll tell you why. First off, the entrance feature right on 37th Avenue is in very poor shape. It needs to be pressure cleaned. The landscaping is so overgrown that you can't, when you're making a left-hand turn or you're making a U-turn, it's very dangerous. And that landscape probably hasn't been replaced in 25, 30 years. I'm not talking about the palm trees. I'm talking about the shrubs and all that kind of stuff. Similar to what we've done in our downtown, how we've refreshed the downtown with new trees, new shrubs, and after so many years on the medians. I think it looks really shabby. It's a main entrance point to the city. I think it could look so much nicer, and I don't think it will cost that much money.
We'll get clarification on that.
Yeah, if you could do me that favor through
Absolutely.
the manager's office, just
100%.
send me an email to see who's responsible for that, so I know. So maybe if it's our responsibility, maybe we can include some money to budget some new landscaping in that area for next year. Thank you.
So we were down to milling and resurfacing. Channel markers, upgrade and maintenance program. This is for the replacement of channel markers. Sometimes they get blown away by storms. Currently, we have fund balance, so we're not recommending funding that request. Cartagena Circle landscape improvements, we're currently not recommending funding that request. DeSoto Fountain Traffic Circle, so we have a grant application for this particular item, and so we believe that we have a good chance of receiving that grant. We should hear soon, and so we're recommending funding it based on the fact that we have grant funding that would supplement that. Giralda Avenue tree grate installation, we're currently not recommending funding this item. Ponce de Leon Boulevard streetscape improvements, Phase 3, we are recommending funding the request of $250,000 to complete that project. Okay. Ponce de Leon Park improvements, $100,000, we're currently not recommending funding. And so going down to the last item, this estimate came out of discussions that happened a couple of months ago about the FPL lights and how to address the replacement. And so we know that subsequent discussions, this is not something that we're pursuing, but at the time the department came up with an estimate, and so we've included it here. We're not recommending funding that. And so in total, we are recommending funding the $21,635,411 out of general capital towards the projects that we've reviewed, $1,016,450 out of AIPP, Art in Public Places. We have logged here $130,000 in grants that will come into the general capital that we are anticipating. The $892 out of the Neighborhood Renaissance Program Fund. The roadway fund, which is a program for just over $1.4 million. And then just under $1.2 million in impact fees to the items that we discussed. Funding the stormwater and sanitary sewer request with $6.5 million and $2.4 million respectively. The country club items for a total of $817,646. The parking fund, which would fund $2.8 million, and the fleet fund, which is a replacement of vehicles for $3.6 million, for a total recommended funding for our capital improvement plan of $43,386,270. Not funding almost $21 million in requests that we've gone through. And so you see that prioritizing these projects based on the funding that's available to us is certainly a task, and we have to really look to what we can accomplish in any given year, and prioritizing life safety and community asks. And so this is kind of where we land. So based on this discussion and any input that comes from here, these are the projects that you will see funded in your July 1 budget estimate, and will be part of the budget that we present on July 10th as part of the proposal for the millage.
All right. Anything further, Madam Director? Anything further from the commission?
No.
Thank you for your time, and we will address any questions that were asked at this meeting. We'll follow up.
Thank you to staff, as always. Thank you for all your hard work, your input, and your guidance. And we look forward to ratifying the budget. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you.